So today's talk is about faith and refuge, two kind of topics that are a little bit out of vogue in the West for very good reasons. Because when you say the word faith, usually people think blind faith, and they think of religious fundamentalism and they think, I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be bigoted and killing someone in the name of God and, kind of judging people and full of guilt and shame and beat myself up. That's what they think of when you say faith. But faith, if based on, logic and intelligence and examination, can be can be very nourishing and give you courage to face the hardships of life. It can really be inspiring. It can help you, it can give you fortitude and spiritual nourishment, and can help you find peace, and so it has a flip side which a lot of people forget. As long as it's not illogical, as long as it's not, and as long as you remain open to the mystery that you don't know everything, and therefore, be prepared to reassess your ideas and your philosophy based on the new information you encounter. So in the basis of the teachings I'm giving today are Tibetan Buddhism, because they talk about refuge in the most detailed way and they emphasize faith. So it's quite beautiful, the teachings they have. And I think, it's like taking refuge is like, means becoming a Buddhist, taking the Buddha as your teacher, the Dharma as your path, and the Sangha as the companions on the path. And it's a bit like the difference between dating and getting married. Like people regard you differently when you say, this is my husband, or this is my boyfriend, or my lover. And I don't know if it changes the relationship between you. Probably it does, but I know that it definitely changes the way people look at you from the outside. And there's that kind of commitment. Although these days, people are kind of cynical, and when they say they're getting married, you're like, I wonder how long it'll be till they get divorced. But it's also good to remember that refuge is something we do every day. And if you don't actually practice or think about the meaning of refuge, taking refuge, the ceremony itself will have no meaning. And like marriage, if you don't nourish it every day, it will have no meaning. So there are three kinds of faith. The first one is vivid faith, which is thinking of the many qualities of the Buddha. For me, it's really helpful to think of the Buddha as a human being and not a god. This is a person who in the axial age accepted people from the lowest caste into the Sangha and said everybody has the potential to become awakened. In an age where women weren't considered as human beings, they were like property, or things you guarded, like hoarded. He said women have the equal capacity for awakening, and he set up the fourfold Sangha, nuns, monks, lay women, lay men, and affirmed women's capacity for enlightenment. And he always showed compassion. He always acted with integrity. He actually had very high standards for ethics, and was always quite rational, and the first thing he laid down was do no harm, and the second thing was benefit others and purify your mind, and I feel his teachings are so sophisticated. I feel like he was a person of incredible integrity. I mean, a person who had the world at their feet, who had a beautiful wife, lots of concubines, lots of money, everything going for him, everything that the world says is happiness, who just gave it all up to walk in the streets and accept food from peasant farmers and encounter all kinds of people on the road, to walk through the forest when there are wild animals, and, just live with 3 robes and a bowl when you've grown up in a pampered palace is pretty incredible. He must have been driven by a very profound yearning for peace and an end to suffering, and a wish to benefit others. Like the fact that he didn't just abide in his own peace, that he then returned to his ex-wife and his family and gave them teachings, and they also benefited. And like he wasn't just a flaky guy shirking his responsibility, and that he founded this community, which is still alive today, that so many people have benefited from, and people in intense suffering, like women who'd lost their children, people who their spouse had tried to murder them, sons who'd murdered their fathers, all kinds of, women who'd lost every child they'd ever tried to birth, people with great poverty, all kinds of people would come to him and find solace. So that kind of compassion, that sense, that also that amazing capacity he had to relate to people who come to him from different angles, and give them a teaching appropriate to their karma and their perception and their life experience. Like to a woman who was like an illiterate peasant, he just said, just be mindful as you let the rope down the well. When you let the pot and the rope down the well, be mindful, stay in the present moment with that, and breathe with that, and everything you do, have mindfulness. And then, to someone like Shariputra, one of his main disciples, a Brahmin and a scholar, he, expounded this really profound philosophy of, selflessness and just the breadth and the depth of his teachings is so incredibly profound. And in Mahayana, Buddha is not just a historical person or a human being, but a force of awakening, that a capacity that we all have for wisdom and compassion in the world. So either both Theravada and Mahayana say there have been many Buddhas in the past and there will be many Buddhas in the future. And it's also the capacity we have to be there for each other. Like if you think of the darkest moments of your life, when someone was there, when someone reached out a hand to you, even if it was just like you were a crying baby and your mother fed you, she was a Buddha for you in that moment. She was a refuge. So we've all had moments of refuge, but it's an unconditioned refuge, which is so profound, beyond the ups and downs of life, that inner refuge of peace, that unbreakable wisdom mind, that can flow with the beyond the causes and conditions and the ups and downs of life, So vivid faith, thinking of the qualities of the Buddha, by like maybe visiting temples, going on pilgrimage, seeing objects that remind you of the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, hearing stories of great spiritual friends, one develops a kind of enthusiasm, a kind of faith. And then the next level of faith is like an eagerness to engage in positive actions, to avoid negative actions, and to avoid bad rebirth. So if you meditate, you become more sensitive, and you start to think about your impact on others, and you start to become aware of what an impact you're having on the world, and what you've done in the past, and how you can do it better, And then the next level of faith is confident faith in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, that arises from the depths of your heart when you understand the extraordinary qualities and power of their blessings, and that they're the only, if you're a Buddhist, the only unfailing refuge in life and death. It's like the seed from which all things grow, like the fertile ground for the spiritual life, which is based on examination and logic, not blind faith. Like in Tibetan Buddhism, they say to not examine the teacher is like jumping off a cliff without a parachute, and to not examine the student is like not examining what you're eating to see if it's poison. So you want to clearly examine what you're taking on, and test it for yourself, and then only based on that, like a goldsmith tests gold. He melts it, he breaks it down, making sure the fire doesn't and only then would one adopt it. And continuing to be open to and revise teachings as well, so that you don't end up in a cult, that somebody's not accountable, or that there's a misuse of power, or that you're thinking you're better than everyone else in this little special group and completely losing touch with reality. Yes. So there is a story that Tibetan Buddhists give about the power of the mind and faith. There was this old lady who, her son, she was in Tibet and she was a peasant, and she was never going to travel out of the farm where she lived. And in those days, going to India was like a life or death thing. You might die on the way, and it might take years before you could return. Her son was a merchant going to India and trading things. And he's like, do you want anything, Mum? Can I bring you something? And she's like, bring me a holy relic so I can worship it and make good karma and develop my faith and my practice. So, being an absent-minded businessman, he was like almost back to his village from India, and he realized, I forgot to bring a holy object. What am I going to do? I totally forgot. And on the way, he found a dog's skull, and he's like, that'll do. And he pulls out a dog's tooth and like cleans it and wraps it up in some expensive silk, and then he brings it out and he gives it to his mother, and he says, here is the tooth of a great saint. You can worship it and make good karma. And, being a fairly naive peasant, she just was like, wow, this is the substance of the holy being who dedicated their life to virtue and had so much wisdom, and, wow. And every day she would bow to it and chant and make offerings, and with so much faith and devotion. And apparently based on that, she attained like some pretty profound levels of realization. And that even the tooth was transformed into like a relic, like Buddhist relics. It's weird, but I don't know, Tibetans love this kind of stuff. So they start to exude these little balls, which is strange, but these little balls they multiply. So I've seen photos of this, but I don't think it's that important. But I think it is interesting that people's faith can have a really profound effect. So is it the object, or is it the person's faith that makes it holy? Like when you go to a monastery where people have been praying for generations, there's a certain kind of energy there. Or if you go to a place where there's been a really traumatic event, you can kind of feel it. Like if you went to Auschwitz, you could probably feel that there was some pretty bad. It's like if someone's just been having an argument and you walk into the house and you're like, and the two people are being silent, but you're like, wow, something happened here. I just feel uncomfortable. You can feel those things. So the person's faith, that practice, those generations of practice can be a profound and inspiring foundation for practice. So then there is 3 kinds of refuge. We've talked about the 3 kinds of faith, which are vivid, eager, and confident faith. And so the 3 kinds of refuge are the lesser refuge, which is one is like trying to be happy in this life, trying to avoid negative rebirth, lower realms, and just, to have good things. And then the next level of refuge is realizing that no matter where you're reborn in samsara, in the world, in the wheel of birth and death, it's going to be impermanent. It's like a holiday on a credit card, that eventually the debt will come, you know? So you just realize, like, wherever I'm born in conditioned existence with a deluded mind, I'm going to suffer. So I have to take out this arrow in my chest. You know, like what we try to do, it's like what we try to do with our trauma. We try to dress it up and make it better, make it interesting, make it arty, but it's still trauma and it still has to come out at the end of the day. So it's a bit like that, like delusion, ego. As long as you have delusion and ego, and as long as you are not completely realized, you're not going to have the full and amazing, joyous capacity that you have to reach happiness and realization as a human being. So yeah, like we need enlightenment, basically. We need to purify our mind. So that is the middling refuge, you know, of just like, I want to get out of samsara. I want to get out of deluded existence. I need to purify my mind. Just making samsara comfortable is not going to work anymore. Yeah. And then, which, you know, traditionally that level of refuge would be called like seeking to become an arhat, to get out of the wheel of birth and death. But I guess, you know, from a psychological point of view, you might compare it to kind of realizing that your trauma is a problem and you need to heal. That might be another way of looking from a more progressive point. Okay, and then the advanced refuge is one sees that like just to seek one's own liberation is not enough, because none of us exist in a vacuum, that happiness isn't just a personal matter, we're all interconnected. So we need to create conditions for the well-being of everyone in society, but also ultimately to become a Buddha, to liberate all beings from samsara. That's where the bodhicitta comes in. So the ultimate refuge is that the emptiness of mind is the ultimate dharma. The fact that we can, and the clarity, the fact that things appear, they can be known, but they're impermanent. They're like a dream. You know, so you can have this dream where you have this really elaborate experience, but in the end you wake up and none of it was real. Or like these things happen, but they're not permanent, and they're without a permanent, unchanging self, because they're arising due to causes and conditions. You know, so the emptiness of things, the fact that you can't grasp them, the fact that they're dependent arising, the fact that they're empty of a permanent, unchanging nature, is the ultimate dharma. Knowing that experientially, realizing that, knowing that the self is also a sock puppet. Is like, you know, you remember the Muppets? Like, you know, looking at the Muppets in the box of the TV is one thing, and then zoom back and you see there's a person there with a hand, you know, and it's not quite the same. Once you see that person there with a hand, it's not quite the same. So yeah, the ultimate emptiness, realizing that experientially, seeing that the self is provisional, that it's impermanent, dependent arising, ultimately lacking in true existence on an ultimate level, has a relative existence that arises due to causes and conditions. Realizing that emptiness is the ultimate dharma, knowing that at the same time, even though that things still appear, they arise, they abide, they dissolve, but it's like a dream. The clarity with which things appear is the ultimate sangha, the ultimate community. And the union of clarity and emptiness is the ultimate Buddha. So this is the ultimate refuge. And the way one would take refuge, like in Tibetan Buddhism, you don't have to do this, but this is what they do. Every morning they imagine the Buddha sitting in front of them. and they know that the Buddha represents the body of all enlightened beings. His speech represents the Dharma. He's an archetype. He's not a god. He's just a symbol of what we ourselves can become. And his body represents the Sangha, his speech the Dharma, and his mind the Buddha. And you just, thinking about his tremendous qualities, his great compassion, his vow to, because, from a traditional Buddhist point of view, the Buddha came back over many lifetimes to become a Buddha. Even in both Theravada and Mahayana, there's stories of that. And his tremendous dedication, and the many times he gave up his life to serve others. So you think about that and all his qualities, and you really just have to read, the Majjhima Nikaya or something to feel some faith in this guy, had some very deep knowledge. You imagine him in front of you, and you imagine all beings are around you. The people you don't like are in front of you. Your mother's on your left, your father's on your right, your family, your friends are behind you. People you don't like teach you the most, show you where your real spiritual practice is with. So that's why we put them in front of us. And then all beings are all around us, join us in taking refuge in the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. And so you say kind of, oh, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, whatever happens to me, favorable or unfavorable, good or bad, whatever suffering may befall me in good health or bad health, I have no refuge other than you. I take you as my support and make offerings to you. And then you say this many times, and then you imagine that the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha dissolve into you, and that your mind is inseparable with the Buddha's mind. And that's why at the beginning of any practice in Tibetan Buddhism, and most practices in Theravada too, they say Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. So it's also like declaring, it makes the practice more powerful. And in Tibetan, and more meritorious, like it's like someone who, if you issue a press release saying, I'm going to do this, it's got a bit more impact, and it's also the foundation for all other vows, like the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts or, monastic life. It's like the foundation vows, and it's good to set up a little corner of a shrine in your house with a Buddha statue, a little stupa or a picture of a stupa, which represents the Buddha's mind, and a Dharma text. Just wrap it in a nice cloth and put it up somewhere high. And don't let it touch the floor, and keep it nice and clean. And if you want, a nice practice is the 8 offering bowls every morning, because it's an easy way to make merit. It doesn't cost anything. It's a traditional offering that when a great person will come to your house in India, you'd wash their feet because they've been walking through the desert. You'd offer them water, and then you'd offer them angam padam pushpe, flowers for the blossoming of good qualities, incense for moral conduct. You would light lamps everywhere for wisdom. You would anoint them with perfume and incense for faith and the moral conduct. And then you would offer a feast for meditative qualities to grow, and a musical show, which is like you just put some little symbols, these kind of symbols there, in praise of the Buddhist qualities. And you think of these things as you offer these 8 bowls every day, but you don't have to. It's just something we do. Or another thing is just maybe a cup of water with some flowers or something. It's a bit more low key for those who don't want to do the 8 bowl thing. But it's nice, like when you have to get up and make those offerings, it kind of then sets you up to do a meditation in the morning, and when you imagine the Buddha dissolving into you, you receive blessings of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, with a mind state free from elaboration. you are resting in the ultimate, you know, non-dual clarity, emptiness, real refuge. But that's a lifetime practice, that one, realizing that one. You know, and when you meditate, like if you do a lot of meditation, this kind of faith doesn't need to be fabricated. It just arises because it's like, I feel peace, I feel joy when my mind is not full of junk, you know, and it just naturally, this kind of faith arises naturally. But for those of us who don't, you know, pull our finger out and practice enough, cultivating faith is more of a requires a little more effort, you know. And it can be a real cushioning thing. I know, like when my father died and I had no faith in anything, I felt really lost and kind of had this midlife crisis at 14. You know, what's it all about? What's the meaning of life? And since then, you know, I lost my grandparents and I lost my foster daughter and I lost, you know, people I loved who died or dumped me or whatever, or I dumped them, you know. But those kind of losses, you know, can be really devastating. And I have to say, none of those losses have been as bad as the first one, because I had some mental resilience and some, you know, I mean, I guess from an atheist point of view, you could say, well, she's drunk the Kool-Aid and she's, you know, got a sweet fantasy going on that, you know, that she can't quite face the harshness of reality. But I think Buddhist teachings are actually really very open and frank about death and the process of dying and the process of grief, and the fact that we actually prepare ourselves. It's like training people to fold their parachutes before they jump out of the plane. You know, you can just turn up on the day and jump out of the plane and go, ah, or you can prepare and learn how it jumps and, you know, mentally prepare yourself, and then you're still going to be going, ah, but it's a little bit more prepared because you knew what to expect, you know. So Buddhists say life is impermanent, you're going to die, everything's, you know, suffering comes, you know, nothing lasts, but by the way, you have this pure nature, you know, you can make your life more manageable, you can fold your parachute better, you can, you know, land better, you can stop jumping. So it's like it smooths that life still happens, shit still happens, but you're smoothing the ride, you're more prepared, you have more, you know, better skills, more awareness. Yeah. And then they say when you walk, you imagine that you're, you know, Tibetans have this practice of walking around holy objects, like they walk around Mount Kailash and they walk around stupas. And it's actually a nice practice to walk mindfully with awareness, and it's also like how they get their exercise, and they do a bit of gossiping as they walk around the stupa as well. So don't want to be gossiping all the time, just a little chat and then back to practice. But it's like a way that they put practice in their daily life and embody the Dharma when there's these outward objects that one develops faith towards, you know. It's actually quite a skillful thing. Like in Nepal, they have this really big stupa, Bodhanath stupa, and it's huge. You have to walk past it to get to a shop or to get to the other part of town. So everybody's going past it and kind of remembering, oh, there's the Buddha. Oh yeah, awaken mind, which is a nice practice. So they say as you walk, imagine walking around the Buddha, that he's on your right shoulder, and remember the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and remember compassion, remember the saints that have gone ahead. And if you're getting sleepy, feel free to open the door to let in some cold air. Yeah, and then like when you eat, imagine offering it to the Buddha. You can just say Om Ahum, the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, white Om, red Ah, blue Hum, and you offer the food as nectar to the Buddha. Or you can say, this wonderful food is the gift of the earth, the sky, and much hard work may aid it in mindfulness in order to continue on the path of understanding and compassion, which I can give you or you can find online. And so when you take refuge, there are things to be abandoned, which are when you take refuge in the Buddha as your teacher, the Dharma as your path, the Sangha as your community, you abandon taking refuge in other religious paths. You can read about them, but you don't take refuge in them. And that could also mean, like, you know, taking refuge in things that are not really a refuge, you know. Yeah. And then taking refuge in Dharma, don't hurt living beings, because the foundation is do no harm, right? And you know, we're in this sacred interconnected relationship with all beings, right? So we don't want to hurt them. And taking refuge in the Sangha of practice, don't hang out with people who divert you from practice too much, like who, you know, don't respect your beliefs or whatever, you know, what you hold sacred. It doesn't mean you can't just have normal friends, but it just means, you know, meet regularly with people who support your aspiration to a more meaningful, compassionate life, and who water good seeds in you, you know. Yes. And then, okay, so things to be adopted. So Tibetans are very Catholic about some things, like a little broken piece of statue, they'll put it up high, they'll never disrespect it, they'll never point their feet towards it. A little piece of red cloth, you know, one like a Tibetan Buddhist would frown upon putting anything on the ground, any Dharma text on the ground. That's why their shrines are always up high, like at eye level. You know, it's the intention that counts, but it doesn't hurt to show respect to something sacred. Not because a piece of paper is sacred, but because of what it represents. And, you know, obviously being a Buddhist, you wouldn't just treat a Dharma text sacred. You would, you know, see a homeless person and have compassion for them too, because they have Buddha nature. So you're in a sacred relationship with everything. Of course, it's pretty hard to see everything as sacred all the time. But you do your best. And then, yeah, like when you have a Dharma text or a Dharma magazine that you want to, you know, get rid of, you just burn it and you imagine all the words, the wisdom going up into space, or you can recycle it, but don't throw it in the garbage. And yeah, you know, promote the Dharma, promote the creation of Dharma books, the growth of communities, the places of refuge, you know, monasteries and retreat centers, and support the monastic Sangha and the growth of the lay community, but, you know, not converting people, just if they're interested. Building community and respecting spiritual teachers, but always questioning them as well, not blindly. And, you know, good in bad, in sickness and health, entrust yourself to the three gems. And because all well-being springs from the blessings of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So, like they say, this mind of virtue, this mind of taking refuge, this mind of seeking the sacred this mind of seeking virtue arises rarely, as when a flash of lightning cleaves the night, and its glare shows all the dark black clouds had hid. Likewise, rarely through the Buddha's power, virtuous thoughts arise, brief and transient in the world. Likewise, the thought of compassion and bodhicitta. So, you know, cultivate that. That's from the Bodhisattva's way of life. And like when you set off in a direction for a trip or something, you say, you know, I see a safe journey and I see a safe return. May the Buddhas bless my endeavor, you know, something like that. Refuge is the foundation, you know, of spiritual practice. So not that you have to be Buddhist to benefit from the teachings of the Buddha, but it's like more of a serious commitment. And they say that with vows, whatever you do has more power. So if you take the vows and break them, that's not good either. And distance yourself from negative actions. Support, you know, your vows and the growth of good qualities. Do, you know, with developing faith and taking refuge, you find that you naturally are more inclined to do good things, to contemplate the Dharma, to avoid doing wrong. You receive more blessings and good qualities on the path and become kind of less attached to worldly existence. And this Patrul Rinpoche, this Lama, he says, you know, people invite a Lama to come and pray over their sheep, and they don't understand that what the refuge is and what the responsibilities of being a Buddhist are. And he said that's like inviting a king to come and sweep the floor of your barn. So, you know, kind of don't just ask the Buddha for, like, you know, give me a motorcycle, build me a new house. It doesn't quite work like that. I mean, I don't think you're going to do that, but some peasants in Asia are a bit like that. They're like, hey, Buddha, you know, can you give me some money or help me pass my exam or something? You know, it's through your own efforts that you achieve good things. But there's no doubt that there is some blessing there, you know, because of the people who've gone ahead of us on the path and made aspirations. You know, like they say the fact that the Buddha's teachings are still here is because of his past merit and aspirations to benefit others. And they say if the benefit of refuge could take form, space could not hold it. So, you know, Tibetans like a bit of grandiosity there. Yeah, but, you know, waking up in the morning and thinking, you know, may I have compassion, may my mind turn towards Dharma. Bless me that adversities in life will lead me to the path of Dharma, that the path will clarify all doubts, and that I may realize perfect co-emergent wisdom. That I may, you know, today may I follow the footsteps of the Buddha. So that's why when we say, I take refuge in the Buddha, we should think these things, you know, may I walk the path of non-violence, may I develop true peace, may I be full of compassion, may I benefit others, you know. And that's why we take refuge. It's not to kind of feel smug or better or that we can do shitty things when we go outside because we're saved. You know, it's about reminding ourselves to cultivate the Buddha within, you know, that we're committing ourselves to virtue. So this is the whole point of refuge, and taking the refuge vow. And yeah, so that's the deal with faith. Faith is something, you know, it doesn't just always arise automatically. It can be cultivated, and that's, you know, the practice of being a Buddhist and the responsibilities that taking refuge lays out. And then, you know, usually we would take like the 4 or 5 precepts with that as well. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't commit sexual misconduct, and don't take intoxicants. Sometimes the intoxicants one is optional because, you know, certain cultures have a very big social culture of drinking, you know, socially, not necessarily like to become drunk, but just, you know, to share a glass in celebration or something. So usually we say, think about whether you really want to take the 5th one or not. Yeah, so do you have any questions before I before we do the refuge ceremony?
No, I've been reading a lot. And